I mean that all in the most loving way possible. So the key verse tonight is going to be Matthew 7, 1 through 6. Do not judge so that you may not be judged, for by the judgment which you judge, you will be judged. And by the measure which you measure, it will be measured to you. See, they don't learn that part. That part's hard to say. Then, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but not notice the beam in your own eye? Or how will you say to your brother, permit it so that I may take out the speck from your eye, and behold, the beam is in your eye? Hypocrite, first take out the beam from your eye, so you can see clearly to take out the beam from your brother's eye. Do not give that which is holy to the dogs, neither throw your pearls before the pigs, lest they will trample upon them with their feet, and after turning may rip you to pieces.
We don't usually say that last verse with the rest of it, but I kind of think it goes.
Okay. I kind of thought you did too. So, if we start to look at this in the ways that we're looking at it today.
What was the way that the people in Jesus' time would have thought about the idea of judgment? When they heard judge not, how did they think of in their mind's eye on what they use judgment for and all of that? And the idea of judgment is effectively to decide in their language, to determine this or that, good or bad. And in Roman culture, and we've been saying this 500 times, so if I sound like a broken record, good. But the biggest thing in Roman culture was to win, right? They wanted to be first. And again, Roman society, it was this honor-shame basis. And so they wanted to bring honor to their families, to themselves, and avoid getting shame to themselves and to their families. And so they wanted to defend that honor and assert it publicly, in a very public way. So as it applies to judgment, when a peer or a rival makes a mistake, it's an opportunity to assert dominance or superiority over them. So it's like, aha, I can use this to my advantage, and I'm going to point it out to everybody, and everybody's going to know I'm going to score points for it. And so, news of the mistake is shared in a way that best advances one's own agenda and their status. And it's not in the way that best helps the one person who makes a mistake. It's not like they're pointing it out to everyone, hey, there's a banana peel here, everyone's going to slip on it. It's like someone slipped on that banana peel and, hey, look at that guy. He made a mistake. Laugh at him, and look at me. I didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very calculated thing. It's not meant to help, but it's meant to push someone else down or maybe lift yourself up. So we can look at the same in Jewish culture.
Yeah, Jewish culture. Again, the good news is they had a law that was, in some ways, many ways, higher than a Roman law. So there's an emphasis on the need for justice and righteousness. That's not really uncommon, right? Leviticus 19:17, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. You're not supposed to hate your brother. There's a lot of things in there that you would think would lead people the right direction, but again, between some things about the law and some things about our own human nature, those things come together and they produce maybe not exactly what God really has in mind when it comes to truly righteous judgment, and especially in Christian judgment where there's actually a forgiveness and grace clause in there somewhere. So there is an emphasis on doing things the right way in Jewish culture. Serious matters are to be decided by spiritual leaders, and there must be adequate witnesses. There must be due process, and so they want the judgment to be correct and right in God's sight. There's a strong value of private rebuke over public shame. And then sometimes judgment and response to indiscretions tend to be more legalistic. So working miracles on the Sabbath, or who sinned. So there's one point of view that says, hey, Jesus worked on the Sabbath whenever he healed the person, at the pool. Well, is that really what God intended? Is that what really mattered? Is that what, was that the intent of the law? or were they looking for opportunities to pronounce judgment? So yes, judgment and fair judgment and righteous judgment that they thought God would appreciate or would have done himself was true, but it was also, again, the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament a lot of time is the heart. And so where's the heart in trying to, like Martin said, point out everybody who slipped on the banana peel? Because there's a lot of banana peels in life. And if somebody points them all out every time we step on one, it's going to be rough if they do it in the wrong way. So American culture.
Yeah. So in our culture, so we've talked about kind of from a historical standpoint, what do we think how do we approach the concept of judgment? Any ideas? How do we see judgment, judging others, determining right and wrong, and all of that? Any thoughts?
Well, we judge each other
Yeah.
all the time, everywhere.
We judge each other all the time? Okay. How so? We're told to test the spirits. Okay. Yeah, to see if they're good or bad. So we do some of that. We do express judgment. Okay. Yeah, Jesus told us to use righteous judgment. Okay. And how about even just outside the church? Because there are people who just never set foot. And they make judgment all the time too, right? And so what do we see? What's characterized by judgment in our society? What's the purpose of it?
Well, if I see a truck that's
Mm-hmm.
jacked up, it's got huge tires,
Okay.
I
Right.
think either daddy's money,
Right.
you're way deep in debt, you'll never get out of it.
Right.
But I don't know.
Right. Let me paraphrase that with 20% less monster truck imagery. But the idea of like seeing like a jacked up truck or something, you make a judgment call based on that. You might not have ever met that person, might not know anything about that, but you see something superficial and you kind of know that person sometimes, or maybe you think you know that person sometimes.
And then you find out it's Pat Gramling driving the monster truck. And you're like, I could not be more wrong about who was in that vehicle. You know?
Right.
So.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
People judge by
Yeah, no, you go ahead, and then I'll get to Doug in a second. Okay, I'll come back to you, and I'll go to Doug real quick. Doug. Uh-huh. Right. Mhm. Yeah. Right. Mhm. Right. Hopefully, we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. What we do with that idea. Yeah.
just going to say that people in the world today judge what will hurt somebody,
Mhm.
what will hurt them.
Right.
So, well, that's not hurting.
Right.
So it's okay.
Right.
Or you're hurting him by saying that, so you're wrong.
Mhm.
You're right.
Right.
If you're hurting somebody by saying something, you're wrong.
Right.
So it's, don't judge anybody if you're going to hurt somebody. That doesn't work because
Mhm.
there's
Right, right. It's like people overcorrect on the idea of judgment. You like give judgment when it's not needed, or you withhold judgment when you really should be. And so just because you don't want to offend anybody, there's that sense too.
Lately, one of the things that, and I saw this on TV, so it must be right. But so I saw it on TV, but they were talking about just different things in life. If you have a pendulum attitude, in other words, it swings way over to the right, or it swings way over to the left, it's usually not a healthy way of looking at something. Because a lot of times the pendulum idea is, well, because this is way over here, I have to be way over here. And that really leaves out the word truth out of the matter. That just comes into well, I'm just going to stay far away from something. Instead of, no, let's just do it the right way the first time, which maybe that's in the middle somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean the middle means you make concessions that aren't godly, or that you just let things happen that shouldn't happen, or that you're not, you don't obey the truth. But it also means that you're not letting, just because Bill thinks something, or Bill reacts a certain way, or Bill whatever, Yeah, that can be a factor in influencing Bill, but in general, I should not just, oh, well, I got to go way over here. And I think the judgmental category, that's a big one. Because people think, well, if you say anything to me, you must be way over here. And that's not true at all. And that may scare you from saying something next time. And so you got to be careful with the pendulum that you don't swing so far away or so far towards something that it's actually more inaccurate than the first thing you tried.
Yeah, I think we in some ways, I think we have just 10,000 foot view. We almost have like a mix of both the Jewish version and the Roman version. That it's like for our rivals, we kind of take the Roman approach, where if it's somebody who's a stranger, we don't know them, we're just gonna, we're gonna do what we can to win and put them down, or maybe we want justice instead of mercy. We want that person to get their just desserts. But for our friends, we might take the approach of trying to correct them in private and try to help them out and try to do what's best for them. And so I kind of see it as a mixture between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny how something can be wrong until somebody we know is involved in it, and we're like, well, that's not so bad. Right. Has that ever happened? That's happened. Yeah. If you don't know how in the world somebody could do something, or how in the world something like this could occur, and then either someone close to you is involved, or you're involved, and you're like, well, come on, And so is that righteous judgment, or is that situational judgment? That's a lot more situational. That's a lot more, they're either outside and I don't care and I'm going to make myself righteous by pointing them out, or they're on the inside, my inside circle, and now I have to protect them. Maybe the pendulum thing, I'm overprotecting them now, so I'm not even talking to them. I'm not even being honest with, what the Word of God would say to it.
So I think that leads us to the immediate impact, So that misunderstanding in ancient culture, that misunderstanding in our culture, what does that look like? What does that cause whenever we try to affect judgment?
What do you think was the initial ripple effect whenever Jesus said what he says here? What was the initial ripple effect that would have occurred based on the way things currently were there?
What's that? Division? Yeah, I could see that. Hate? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Right. 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 Yeah, they might have this idea that, that God doesn't really enter into it, right? That, yeah, they've got to be careful. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think part of that, whenever they leave God out of the equation, what does that do to authority? Who are they truly putting into authority? Kind of putting themselves, right? Yeah. But we are accountable in the way that we judge, whether we think of it or not.
Who do you think least wanted to be judged in that culture, or told that they were wrong about anything? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what happened whenever you criticized a leader in that religious or political culture? That wasn't freedom of speech days. That was, oh, well, that's easy, we'll just silence you. Or I'll just make sure everybody knows you're not going to heaven now and you're no longer part of our Jewish community and you're out. Or, however they wanted to say that. You're not welcome, or whatever it is. And so that's definitely a problem.
And so when you're using the law for everything that you do, how do you think that affects the way that they use judgment? Do you think that turned their lens upon themselves, or do you think that turned their lens on everybody else? What do you guys think? What's that? Legalistic, right? Kind of made them become critics of everybody that was outside of them. It's like they weren't necessarily looking at themselves, but they were using the law as almost like this checklist. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, oh, that person, you know what? He spent a little bit too much time doing this. That could almost be work on the Sabbath. That was maybe he lifted those logs up and threw them up on the fireplace, and that was one too many logs. I think that could be work, and that could be a sin there. They became critics and wanting to criticize everything that other people did.
I think also because of their position, they felt entitled.
Entitled?
To judgments. And
Yeah.
how dare you tell me I can't because I'm all puffed up with myself because look at me, I'm so great that I am now ahead of
Right.
the church or whatever position they held.
Yeah.
They felt entitled to do it, and no one, how dare anybody question that judgment because
Right. And I'm sure, we're talking about the Pharisees, but nothing like that has ever happened in the church, right? Yeah, okay. So, we can fall prey to those same kind of things, and we got to be careful that we don't.
One scripture that makes me think of is the knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. It's interesting how the more we know about something, or the people who, the religious leaders of the day, maybe they studied, or maybe they just had power because they were Romans, they literally had power. But whenever we accumulate certain things, and sometimes they're blessings, or maybe we worked hard for something, or maybe it's money. Ever know anybody who's had a lot of money and they think they get to call all the shots? I'm not sure how that works, but or if they have all the knowledge, they get to call all the shots. If they have all the power, they get to call all the shots. And it's not really about call all the shots. It's more their attitude of entitlement, which kind of flips to you're not entitled. And that's a complete shift whenever you have, Jesus is saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are, all these people who he's saying that these are the people that actually God is looking at in favor, not necessarily the people who have the most knowledge or the most money or the positions of power. And that's a complete shift. It's a total shift.
Yeah. And I think in a way, having that legalistic view, it can cause us to harden our hearts. You kind of take the heart out of the equation and take, that feeling and that love that God wants us to have, and you're just checking stuff off. And I think that can do a few things. It can have us be comparative in the way that we seek judgment and justice, and that we justify our own faults through pointing out the failures of others. Rather than saying, I have things I need to work on, I'm looking around and I say, well, at least I'm not doing that. And we never look introspectively. So our heart's hard in that way. And I think that another way that can work is that we're, again, being those critics, like what Jason said, and that we're finding opportunities to correct people and assert ourselves over them rather than trying to find opportunities to help people out and lift them up. And so we use fault as leverage in a way to gain advantage of someone. We use faults to make others look worse and make ourselves look better. And so we take that whole idea of judgment and the heart goes out of it, and we can do all of these bad things. Yeah.
Can we sometimes get in trouble with interpretation?
Can we get in trouble with interpretation?
Interpretation and application.
Yeah, definitely.
Not any. Today we call it a legal.
Right. And I don't know, I want to go back to one thing that I had written down we just chose not to mention. And this is a guy from the first century, a Jewish guy. This is a Hillel. He's like a really popular Jewish rabbi. And I like what he said here. Do not judge your fellow until you've reached his place. We might say in the 21st century, until you walked a mile in their shoes. And, we might, like the whole jacked up pickup truck thing, right? We might think that we know everything about that person. We know their life story. But there might be something to it, And so there is sometimes more to a situation than we know. And there's I don't want to call it wiggle room, but yet we need to avail ourselves of the reality of something rather than being quick to have a snap judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good, don't judge by appearances. Right, we do.
I have a funny story about that. Martin probably thinks I derail all the time because I do. But
Totally judge him for that.
he's judging me. But whenever I used to have used to have the kids over for Bible studies on Thursdays for a long time. It got to where they would bring their friends and their friends and their friends. They bring all these people, AKA strangers, into my house. And I have always thought that really helped me on judging people, because there were times they would bring people in that looked all sorts of ways, including murderous, by the way. I mean, sometimes they looked, rough. But we would sit there and we would talk. We'd talk about the Bible. We'd sing. I'd get to know them. And there's one very specific person that the people in those days know who I'm talking about. He was probably 6'4". He wore a biker jacket with an embroidered woman on the back that probably wouldn't fly well in a church building. He had chains connecting everything, his billfold, his shoes, everything. He had he just looked like the most menacing human. And he started visiting for several months at Southwest. And we would see him and we would talk to him, and he was a nice guy. And I always think of him as the person who really helped me to just not judge a book by its cover and to keep working with people. So now I almost find it a game that the worse you look, the more I'm going to get right in your face and act like you're the most beautiful person I've ever seen, even though you scare me to death. So anyway, we all need those experiences, because we've all seen people who look great who turn out to be a slime ball, right? And there's some people who they don't look that great on the outside, but they're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people, and or they become wonderful people. So those are all those, back and forth things that we got to be careful about. And the Bible, of course, talks about that.
Those snap judgments, that can push people away. I mean, there you have maybe a wonderful person, but yet if we've pigeonholed them into something already, we may never give them that opportunity to maybe be better than what they already are.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of change is really required if you read this, if you understand the teachings of Christ? What has to happen inside in order for this to take place, to where you start to have the correct view of this topic of judgment?
An attitude of grace.
An attitude of grace.
Okay.
Love in your heart. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, love in your heart.
So do we think these people didn't love? Or were they selective? Or had the wrong filter, maybe? It's like, I think it's kind of funny, because like everybody probably thinks they have grace for certain things or love for certain things. But really, I think that's what Jesus was doing a lot of times, right? He was saying, I know you think your filter for how you process things is correct, and it's not. I know you think you have love, you don't even know what love is. I know you think you have this, but it's not even close. And I think that's what was weird and interesting and hard for people, is they thought they had it. Like, they're like, I know what you're talking, I do have that. And he kept showing how there's such a much further or higher or better version of what that is.
So you look at yourself.
Yep.
Are you doing the same things you're telling other people not to do?
Right. Yep. Are you looking at yourself? Are you being hypocritical in that? Are you doing the things that you're warning other people not to do? Yes.
I think when we think about the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, God gave us something clean and clear.
Yeah.
Man started changing it, and I think that's what people look at. They look at the changes and provisions that man brought, not what God did sometimes.
Yeah.
Just like Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Man just put burdens upon people that shouldn't be upon.
Right.
I think that's one reason why sometimes the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth is, well, you're judging me, or something like that, because they've heard so many of these other interpretations, not the clean truths, and the things that are made clear, like Jesus.
Right. Yeah, God often makes things so simple for us, but we as people, we want to complicate it. And I think oftentimes we want to complicate it because we want to live in the gray area. It's not that we're trying to find the edge, it's just like we're trying to find the excuse. And I think a lot of times when people say, you're just judging me, it's not that they have a valid counter argument, it's that they want an excuse to continue doing what they're doing.
So, really, the self-awareness piece. Again, that's a very New Testament thought. Not that it's not in the Old Testament some, but really, it is being self-accountable, self-aware. Think about the fact that we're really not supposed to wait kind of like in their culture, for the religious leaders of the day to come to you and say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, or stop doing that, or we're on the street corners watching, making sure nobody works on a Saturday. That's really not the way it should work, ultimately. It should be that we are self-accountable, because we are, to God. That we have some sort of mechanism where we're constantly looking and having some sort of self-awareness or self-reflection or interest in making ourselves better. And of course, to make yourselves better, you have to do that thing nobody likes to do and recognize faults. You have to recognize areas of improvement. And then that leads you to the second thing that you hate, which is work. Work and possible failure. And so those are things that the immediate impact is really those people have a lot, now they have a lot to do. They have a lot to think about. There's an entire thought process we take for granted that they were going to have to go through now that was going to be a lot different.
I think it's James, when he talks about looking in through the law, he doesn't say that it's like, a magnifying glass. It's not like a telescope or a microscope. But yet when we look into the law, it's like a mirror. And so we should be looking at ourselves, not at everybody else.
Mm-hmm. So their response and our response. So at the end of the day, there's some people who are not ready, and still today, so their response was about the same as some people today. They're not ready to leave the position of policing the law. There are some people, that's their thing. They want to police even though that is not their job. Even though that they would do well to police themselves quite a bit. And of course, that's why the scripture goes on to elaborate a little bit and say, for those who are trying to police or those who are trying to, take out the speck out of someone's eye, you've got a lot of work to do on yourself before you can even start to do that. It's literally saying you are not qualified to do that and to look inwardly. But it also says something else that people forget. So that you can help other people. It's really hard. I can probably help somebody in certain ways because I don't have that particular speck in my eye. But if I have a beam in my eye in another category and I try to be influential or help in that way, it's not going to work. Number one, I don't have the respect of the people I'm trying to help because they see this beam sticking out of my eye in the category I'm talking to them, and they're like, you're the wrong person to help me. You're doing a terrible job. So
you have like this little tiny sliver of something in your eye, and you go to an eye doctor, and he's trying to find that little tiny sliver and just delicately get it out. But while he's doing it, he's literally got this big log just sticking out of his face. How could he possibly, help you if he hasn't even helped himself? Doing this delicate surgery, and it's like the log is like knocking over all his tools and stuff. It just doesn't work, and we do the same thing when we don't correct ourselves.
The other item that I would say is that at the end of the day, if I am, and again, this is their response and our response, if I'm always talking about other people, the focus is not on me whatsoever. And there is a little bit of an arrogance and misleading yourself if you talk to somebody else about an issue a lot that you have a problem with. You're almost convincing yourself, isn't this true? You're almost convincing yourself that you know so much about it, or that you have it handled, or that you have no issues with this because you're such an expert or because you're talking so much about it. I've heard people even say, well, if I help other people a lot, then God will forgive me of all the things that I'm currently doing. Like, no, that's not how that works at all, actually. You can't just do a bucket of works over here so you can keep living in the gray or the not gray area. That's not how that works. So sometimes whenever we don't want accountability, we'll just start focusing on everybody else instead of maybe there's some things I need to do myself.
I think sometimes, that you have this overjudgment, and on the other side, that response is that we don't want any accountability at all. And so it's that correcting the other way. It's like, well, if I don't want that lens to ever be on me, then I'm going to try to read a verse like that. Well, then I don't have any judgment for anyone, and I'm going to forgive anything and everything. And again, if I do that, I'm still making myself the authority. I'm just saying I don't want to police anything, but that's not healthy either.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that comes to mind is, of course, Romans 6. How can, just because grace abounds doesn't mean we're supposed to keep on sinning. And that is a piece of the judgment. You want to have a righteous judgment. You want to have accountability. You don't want to just say nothing matters. You don't want to just not have accountability. And so there's kind of a piece of it that goes into that as well. So modern day applications. How are you going to ensure that your judgment, or we'll just call it this topic in general, what kind of gymnastics do you have to go through in your mind and your heart yourself to make this work? What do you have to talk yourself into and talk yourself out of? What do you have to elevate or to remove to make this happen today?
We got to look at ourselves first. Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Have to look at ourselves.
The same issue that you're wanting to work with someone else, make sure that it's not hidden within your character, and particularly if someone knows it now.
For sure.
So there's a word for that, and I'm trying to think. Maybe it's hypocrite,
If we're going to correct others on something, we got to make sure we have that solved in ourselves. Knowledge of the scriptures, right? How can we decide right and wrong if we don't even know what right and wrong is? Right?
And it makes me think of when you go to the scriptures for right and wrong, or you hear a sermon, is your mind saying, those people over there need to hear that sermon? Or are you trying to figure out how can I apply this and be better and more Christ-like myself? You know, there's a lot of times we hear a sermon and we're a little too happy they're saying it because we know someone in the auditorium needs it, instead of, well, maybe you need it. You know, maybe there's something you can learn, you know, for it too. I don't think the preacher's up there preaching so you can then redirect and reflect the sermon to the person next to you. I think they're there so you'll listen to it and you'll take it to heart.
And our lives are pretty busy right now. I think, can we all agree upon that? We don't have maybe a ton of excess time. So if we have a limited amount of time, how much time do we have to police others when we need to be kind of looking inwardly at ourselves? So where are we spending our time?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of things come back down to kind of the simple things. You know, you have 1 Corinthians 13 talking about love, and it goes through all sorts of things there. And at the end it says, and the greatest of these is love. And God does do a really good job of, you know, kind of laying the foundation of, if this foundation's good, then you build on top of it this next thing, and then you build on top of it the next thing, and you build on top of it. You know, and there's scriptures like that where it'll actually build and build and build on the attributes that we're supposed to have. And at the base level, it's supposed to be a love for each other. And so for this to work correctly, it's not just don't judge. It's to be in a position to help others take the speck out of their eye. Is that not true? I mean, don't we need somebody's got to be in a position to do that. Or you got a bunch of people walking around with limited vision. You need to be in a position to help other people. That goes into all sorts of areas of life, is to be in a position of godly influence, and you have to be prepared to do that. It's kind of like if we take this completely out of this world, you know, there's times when I've talked to young people and stuff, and I'm like, I want you to picture the quality and wonderful person you want to marry one day. And then those, you know, okay, they're picturing that, and I tell them, why would they want to marry you? What have you done to prepare yourself for that person? Like, why does this person want anything to do with you? Do you think you're just going to one day grow up and poof, this person's going to show up and there's this amazing human that wants you, even though you've done nothing to prepare yourself for this person or to have these attributes? You want them to have the attributes, but you don't have the attributes. And so this is as much of a lesson about prepare yourself to be effective in the kingdom of God which, by the way, means talking to people about the speck in their eye. That is something we should be able to do. And that is something we should expect. It doesn't happen all the time. It's one of the more uncomfortable things. But one of the reasons why it's so uncomfortable is we're used to the people who do it, having such a problem of their own that we don't respect them, right? You need to be in a position of respect so you can actually do that. That's what we have to work with, is each other, trying to help each other. And so you don't want to come from a heart of tearing someone down. You're actually trying to get them closer to God. And to do that, we have to have ourselves in shape to be able to do that. It's kind of like a lifeguard, trying to rescue somebody out of a pool. The lifeguards are usually in pretty good shape because they're going to have to help themselves and someone else once they get in that water. You had a...
Sometimes I think, though, we use the excuse, I'm not good enough to teach anybody anything. And so that's why a lot of us we don't have any left over for dinner because my house is not clean enough, or I'm not, or we don't talk to somebody about my because we don't know enough. We, a lot of us hold ourselves, we make excuses, and it's because I'm not good enough.
And I think that's another aspect that we haven't really looked at too, is that if we live in a community that has harsh judgment, it leads people to think that sometimes, that they're not good enough, that they're not effective enough, that they're not whatever enough. And they, rather than, playing an effective role in their community, they kind of retract and try to, make themselves or make whatever is in their life as secret as possible, because everybody's going to scrutinize it in an unfair way. And if we did practice fair and righteous judgment, I think it would empower people rather than make people just try to cower in fear. And so I think that's another important aspect of that. But yeah, that's something that we have to get by. That's why it's important that we play the role of encourager rather than just shoving people down with our judgment.
Yeah, but the word trust.
Trust.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And trust is something that can't just be created just like that. It's something that's got to be earned between, all of us. For sure.
And who do you trust more? Someone who came to you for the first time and said, "We've never talked before in our lives, but I just want you to know you're doing something wrong." That usually doesn't go over real well. So, being close to people and them knowing who you really are and how your heart really works, and them seeing the good things you've been doing over the years, if they say something, it sure does hold a lot more weight. If you're that kind of person that has shared your life with people and people know you and you're a little bit more transparent, and you care about that person's opinion. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into before a conversation like this ever occurs. It needs to have been built up in love all the way up to that moment. And so the way we live our lives on a daily basis sets us up for success to do this and a lot of other things. Anybody else?
I think that have to be approachable. I was at night on the other day, and this woman came up to me and she said something really nice to me. I'd never seen her. I didn't even realize she was there, but I was on the horse and stuff. And she had the most beautiful smile. And I thought, what a beautiful woman you are, that you took time to talk to a stranger and say something nice that I didn't know that at all, And if we're approachable, even a smile can open a door that we never thought about.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Need to be approachable. Yeah, yes.
The whole thing with everyone has a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you get to conversation with people, no way around it. I always thought the key is that you can use, especially if they know that you have that spectrum, as this is what that's what Dad's done to me. I'm trying to change. It's what you shouldn't do. And you got that conversation.
Yeah.
Just avoiding the conversation.
Yeah, we can use the challenges that we've had previous in our lives as that sort of conversation starter in a way that We're not just going up to that stranger and saying, hey, correct this, but hey, I've dealt with that. This is what helped me get through it. And the fact that we're not ashamed to admit that we have that speck in our eye is a big thing. So, because that takes admitting that we had that in order to start that conversation.
Now that we wrap up here, what's the roadblock to wanting to concentrate on removing the beam, it says here, speck or beam, from our own eye? What is the holdup on that? How come it is hard for us to want to have a healthy bit of criticism of our own self and to really actively work on ourselves in certain ways?
Right? It's a big one.
Yep.
Fear. It's another big one.
Well, it's easier to look at somebody else and notice the speck than to look at themselves.
Right? It's easier to look at others.
Take that log out.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need that introspection. So a lot of times we lack self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. I think that, we haven't used the word lazy, but there is a lot of factors that if you really boil it down sometimes, a thing that gets between us and being godly or us and having a particular characteristic that we should have, it's laziness, I mean, maybe the reason why we don't read our Bible as much as we should, it's a real simple word that's called lazy, or we don't do something else. We don't get up on time like we should to go because we're lazy, and I don't think that's a great characteristic for us to have. No one wants to admit, whenever you shake someone's hand when you meet him for the first time, hi, I'm Jason, and just so you know, I'm lazy. No one wants to have that. But, there's some very simple things. And again, like we said, sometimes we complicate things. But when you really boil it down, God also is good at simplifying things. He said you need to love one another. And there's other passages that really just talk about, you have to get up. You have to not be lazy. You have to really want certain things if you want the benefit of it. And that's really the cause and effect piece of it. If you want the benefit of being Christ-like or godly or having a godly life, you have to put yourself in that kind of shape, and you may have to look at the beam in your own eye. Maybe there's been a beam there for a long, long time. And it's easier to forget it when you talk about everybody else. Mm-hmm. That's right.
For sure. Change is a difficult thing. So making that first step can be the toughest thing.
Idle hands is the devil's work.
Yeah.
When I'm being lazy, actually doing something that I don't want to do. My back hurts. Or they're comfortable being a lukewarm Christian.
Oh,
What'd you say?
comfortable being a lukewarm Christian.
Yep.
I think that's our time for today.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts before we part? And I actually remembered. If
Oh.
you did not have an opportunity this morning to take the Lord's Supper, it is available for you in the fellowship hall. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week with another topic, Lord willing.